How's it going, everyone? Today we'll be doing a Java optional tutorial. So what is a Java optional? Basically, it lets you wrap any object as an optional field. So an optional field means that it could be null. If you don't use optional, then any variable could be null, right? It's hard to tell, and you have to kind of do defensive checks all over the place. But optional is nice because it's very explicit, saying, hey, this variable could be null. It requires special handling. So let's get into how it works. So we have string high here and string high null. And then to declare an optional variable, we have optional type, the variable name, and then actually initializing it. So we have optional.of, which is high here. One note, it can be a null pointer exception if a null is passed into the .of method there. So always make sure to pass a non-null to this optional.of method. The safer alternative is the of nullable. So this can take a null. It is null safe, or it can take a non-null. So I prefer using this one when you can, unless you're absolutely sure that it's not a null that you're passing in. Cool. So now we have two optionals here. This one is present and this one is not present, right? This one could be null or is null. So that brings us to is present. So this checks if an optional is actually there or not. So we do an if is present here, and then we print out the actual value. So to get the actual value that the optional is wrapping, we do the .get. But if you do the .get and the optional is actually empty, then it'll throw a null pointer exception because you're basically getting a null from inside the optional. Okay, so that's why you always need to wrap it in the is present. Okay, same thing here, optional string 2, which is the blank one. What we do is present. Obviously this won't execute when I run this program. And then a little trivia here. So what happens if I do this without wrapping it is present? This will throw a null pointer exception, or some kind of exception. I believe it's null pointer exception. So you always need to pass, or always need to check if the optional is available or not. So let me comment this out because this will throw an exception. Okay, so there is the is empty. So this is the opposite of is present. So I can check if it's empty or not, if that's what your program flow needs to check. Again, one other method here is the optional or else. So this is where you can specify a default. So it'll get unless it's empty. If it is empty, then it'll default to whatever string you have here. So obviously this optional string 2 is the null one, or is the optional empty. So we do or else, and then we default it to this default high, and that'll print this out here. Okay, so let me run this. Okay, so here's my output. So optional string 1 prints out a value here on line 29, and then down here on line 53. Optional string 2 is empty, and then I print out the default value here of string 2. Because we default it here because it is an empty there. Okay, so hopefully that helps you with the basics of optional. That should get you going. There's a few other helpful methods there, but this is pretty much the basics that you'll need to know. Anyways, thanks a lot.